in my, like, towards the end of junior year, going into my senior year of college, I was in a relationship. I was so determined to make it work, and so I treated the relationship as such. I almost had that marriage like mentality where it's like, okay, I can't really see there being anything that we can't work through, so let's just work through it. And so since the ending of that relationship, my views have changed a lot. Initially, my goal in life, one of my goals in life was to get married, and I did have a set timeline for when I wanted to get married. And I've always had such a hard time explaining to people my timeline and my rationale behind it. And I know people are going to disagree with me on this. I know people are going to tell me I have all the time in the world because I already know what's coming. I know people are going to say, like, no, like, you shouldn't get married, in your 20s. Your 20s are for you. And I'm, again, not saying I want to get married tomorrow. I'm not saying I want to get married next year. But I want that, I want that to be something that I'm actively working towards. And my preference would be that that would happen now. And I just don't want to be sitting up here in my 30s waiting for a man. I would rather just come to terms with, like, you know what? Marriage may not happen for me. I may not find my person. So let me just be okay with that. Having a family and stuff like that, I've just chosen to kind of, like, not think about those things or not include those things in my life plans, because not everyone ends up with that. And if that's ends up being my story, if I end up not finding my person, if I end up not getting married, I have to be okay with that. I have to be okay with just me and myself. This episode is going to be talking about relationships, my least favorite topic. So, and this isn't going to be one of those episodes where we're sitting here and we're, bashing men and talking about how trash dating is. That probably will become an episode topic. I'm not going to hold you. But for this episode, I kind of wanted to get into my current views on marriage. Now that I've gotten a little bit older and some of my friends are now getting engaged and a lot of people are out there, dating and starting families and stuff like that, the conversation has come up a lot about, dating and relationships. Something that I have grappled with recently is kind of just talking to people about, like, how I view dating and also how I view marriage, because it's very, very different from how most people view it, especially people in my age range. And also I feel like too, like, with my generation specifically, I feel like a lot of people are starting to become anti-marriage, so then that also kind of plays a factor into, me trying to have this conversation with people. And so I figure, why not kind of go into it and explain why I view it the way that I do. For me, right, when it comes to marriage, I would say that has been a goal in my mind since maybe high school. Not to say that I wanted to get married in high school, but it was around high school that I knew that at some point that is something that I really wanted for myself. And marriage has always been one of those, like, top goals in my life to have. Like, how, like, you have certain things that, like, you want to accomplish and you feel like you won't feel successful or you won't feel satisfied in life until you have certain things. And those things are different for different people. Some people, they want to become a millionaire. Some people, want to get their dream car or buy their parents a house. Like, there's certain milestones that they want to achieve to where they feel like, okay, I've succeeded in life. And for me, marriage has always been a part of that. Literally adding to the list of, I want to graduate from college. I want a full-time job out of college. I want to become a full-time entrepreneur. Literally in that list of life goals that I have for myself, getting married has always been one of them. And I am someone that has a tendency to stress over my goals because I'm a control freak. And a part of me I put so much pressure on myself to make sure that I achieve these goals. And it's like the longer I went without having these goals, the more worried I became. Now, not so much when it came to graduating college. I always knew like getting a college degree was always going to be something that I would accomplish no matter what, no matter how I would get there, how long it would take. Getting my college degree, I had no doubt in my mind that that would happen. But there are some other things that, occurred that kind of put a delay on some of those things. Like, for instance, finding a job. That took me finding a full-time job, mind you, which, if we're being technical, I still haven't had yet. I mean, I do work full-time hours, but in terms of like having a full-time salary, I still I'm now a year out of college, and I still don't have a full-time salary. And the longer it went without me having it, the more I started getting concerned, the more I started beating myself up over it, because I'm just like, I've worked so hard, I've made all these connections, I've done all of these extracurricular activities in college that I thought, would help me get that position. I applied to so many different places, and it just wasn't making sense to me. And I think I did find solace in the fact that there were a lot of other recent graduates who also were suffering with finding a job after college. And so I didn't necessarily feel alone in that or feel like I was the only one, but it didn't make it any less defeating that even to this day, I still don't have a full-time salary, and I don't make enough to provide for myself. It's really, really frustrating. But also, going back to the topic at hand, relationships and marriage, even with that, it's like my dating history has been very interesting. I was a really late bloomer when it came to like dating and stuff like that, because I just didn't date anybody until college. And I talked about this before, and people tend to try to battle me on this, or just women in general. I feel like when women speak on their dating experiences, if it doesn't sound, the most positive, I feel like a lot of other women will try to discredit, another woman's experience. But, not every woman has the same experience when it comes to dating. Some of us are late bloomers, and also some of us just don't have the same options as other women. And I know that, people go back and forth about that. You'll have women who do benefit from some level of, pretty privilege, trying to knock down other women who say like, hey, I don't have the same privilege as you. I don't get men talking to me like that as you do. I feel like a lot of times, women will try to invalidate those that say that, but it's true. And again, this is coming from someone who has been through that. I am not someone that historically has gotten a lot of male attention in the past. I was not used to that. Like I don't get approached by men like that. Yeah, I've had a select few reach out to me in my DMs and stuff like that, but for the most part, I don't have men approaching me like that. And the type of men that approach me, it's questionable. And then you get thrown, like, oh, like you're being picky. No, there are certain kinds of men who don't know how to talk, who don't have any charisma, who don't really seem to have much going for themselves. Those are usually, and men that just I'm not attracted to. And again, I'm not looking for someone that's like, like, I don't know. I feel the need to defend myself, because I already know what the rebuttal is going to be, right? If I say that I'm not attracted to these men, then it's, oh, you're being picky about their appearance. Like, people are just always going to find something to say, but this is just me speaking from experience. I do not have a lot of experience with, men approaching me, especially men that I'm attracted to, or men that I can even hold a conversation with. And so, with that being said, when I got to college, that slowly but surely started to change, but still, all in all, like, I don't have men approaching me like that. With that being said, because I didn't have a lot of dating experience, I wasn't really actually, yeah, I hadn't been on a date until I got into a relationship. So I wasn't going on dates. I wasn't getting a lot of male attention. And so I started to get concerned that it just would never happen for me. And I kind of started to come to terms with the fact that I might not find someone. But then eventually I did, in my, like, towards the end of junior year, going into my senior year of college. I was in a relationship. And so in my mind, I'm like, oh, great. Now I don't have to worry about that. And so in that relationship, I did everything I like when I did everything I possibly could to keep that relationship going. Like, things that, like, I don't want to say I was doing marriage like stuff in a relationship, but things that you would normally, like, break up with a person for. Like, okay, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. I was putting in so much effort into the relationship to work, and I was treating it as if, it wasn't going to end, or I couldn't let it end, right? And so there might have been things that I overlooked or that I put up with when I shouldn't have, and I shouldn't have, as someone that was just a girlfriend, right? Like, with me, I don't know, I felt like I was forcing a lot of stuff, and I was, again, putting up with a lot of things, and I was so determined to make it work, not only just because, I was deeply in love with this person and I wanted to make it work so badly. Because it wasn't like it was a relationship that I didn't want to be in. I want to make that clear as well. It wasn't like I felt trapped or I felt stuck. Like, no, like, I actively wanted to be with this person, and I wanted them to be in my life for a very long time. And so I treated the relationship as such. And because I'm like, okay, like, it almost felt like, okay, now that I have this person in my life and it seems like we're both on the same page with making it work long term, let me do everything in my power to keep it going, because then I don't have to worry about trying to find someone else, or, like, and it's going to sound delusional, but literally, like, when we got together, I was like, oh, now I don't have to worry. Now I don't have to stress about whether or not I'm gonna find someone to get married to, because I found my person. That's how deep I was into this. And so, again, it's like, I literally was doing everything I could. And when I say do everything I could, I mean, like, you know, making it a point to work through issues, not giving up easily. Maybe helping them work through some of their issues. Like, just things that, again, the average girlfriend wouldn't do, but because I was so determined to make this work forever, I just was like, okay, I guess I'll just, keep trying. And that's not to say that I would have ever put up with any type of, like, abuse or cheating, which neither of those things occurred in my relationship. But it just was like, I almost had that marriage like mentality where it's like, okay, I can't really see there being anything that we can't work through, so let's just work through it. And unfortunately, even after doing all of that and doing everything I knew to do to try to keep the relationship going and to keep them happy, even sacrificing my happiness to try to keep their happiness going so that they could stay and not leave me, ultimately things still ended and they still ended up leaving. And so for me, it was just like, okay, I started to kind of panic a little bit again, because I'm just like, bro, like, it took me so long to find this person, and now I got to start all over. So now, once again, I'm worried, like, if I'm ever going to find someone again. And so since the ending of that relationship, my views have changed a lot. And I think I reached a point where I don't know if I necessarily want marriage to be a goal. Because when I set goals like that, it does feel like something that I have to work towards. And it feels like something that, I just put a lot of pressure on myself to achieve that. And I don't ever want to put myself in another situation where I'm not only just sacrificing my happiness, I'm not prioritizing myself, but I also don't want to put myself in a predicament to where I am losing myself and exhausting myself trying to make something work or make someone be with me. It's just it's exhausting, and it was exhausting, and I just don't want to go through that again. And I felt like trying to set this goal of like I have to get married. I'm then putting pressure on myself because then I'm going to fall into like a dark place if I feel like I have failed in that area. Which happened to me at a certain point. With my last relationship ending, I felt like I had failed, and I was beating myself up a lot because I'm like, what more could I have done? Or maybe if I did this differently, like just getting into my head of all the things that I didn't do or that I failed at keeping them in my life. And so just that alone, and again, just that pressure I put on myself to keep the relationship going, it exhausted me. It made me depressed. And I'm like, I don't wanna put myself through that again. Right? And so with that, I'm, trying to approach it differently. But back to the whole marriage thing, right? Because again, initially my goal in life, one of my goals in life was to get married. And I did have a set timeline for when I wanted to get married. And I've always had such a hard time explaining to people my timeline and my rationale behind it. And I know we kind of live in a time where sometimes people can be overly positive and overly optimistic. And that's not to say that you shouldn't be optimistic. And I think that I've gotten better at being optimistic, but I also like to be realistic. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, like, I want a partner, or I want a family by, this time. And so I've had a hard time trying to put into words what that would look like for me ideally. But I came across a TikTok that literally put into words exactly, what my preferred timeline would be with marriage, and why, in my opinion, I do feel like I'm running out of time. And I know people are going to disagree with me on this. I know people are going to tell me I have all the time in the world to find someone. But this TikTok perfectly explains why, for me, I'm starting to like check out already when it comes to getting married. But I'm gonna play the clip, and then I'm gonna explain how this relates to what I feel as well.
I just had the saddest realization. Okay, I want to be a young mom. So let's just say I want to have kids by 28, right? Which means I have to be pregnant by 27. But I want to have like 2 or 3 years alone with my hubby, right? Which would put me at 24. But I want to be married, which means I have to be engaged by 23. But I want to know the guy for at least 1 or 2 years, which puts me at 21. I'm going to turn 21 this year. Which means I have to find my husband this year.
Okay, so you guys saw that clip. Now, going back to my timeline, right? I've always had this thing about getting married by 30. Now, let me explain. Because I already know what's coming. I know people are going to say, like, no, like, you shouldn't get married, in your 20s. Your 20s are for you. Your 20s are for discovering yourself and living your life for you and not being tied to someone. And I get all of that, right? And that's what I'm doing now. More so by force, by default. But that's what I'm doing now. And I completely understand that sentiment of living your 20s for you and having that time to yourself. For me, I've just always been a relationship type of person. I'm not someone that has a genuine interest in dating around, exploring, seeing what's out there. That's never been me, and it's still not me. Granted, I'm at a point now where I'm open-minded and I am open to meeting new people and just getting to know people and see where it goes, right? I'm still open in that regard, but I don't have this desire, because there are some people who maybe they dated a whole bunch when they were in high school and college, and then when they get out of college, they're like, you know what, I've been in so many relationships, I haven't had any time for myself. That makes sense. Or people who have been in like super long-term relationships, and they're like, you know what, I want to know what it feels like to be able to live life fully without having that attachment to someone else. I want to know what that feels like, and completely understand. But that's just not me. That's not my experience. And I feel like people who have had those experiences will try to also put that on me of like, oh, you need time alone. You need time to be by yourself. Not really. And the reason why I say that is, again, because I just had my first relationship. I have not had all of these back to back relationships that most people have had. And so, this idea of I need more time to myself, it's like, well, I had a whole lot of that before my previous relationship. And given the fact that my previous relationship only lasted like 10 months, I believe, that means only 10 months of my life I've been in a relationship. And so this idea that I need even more time to myself, to me, I just don't agree with that. Again, I'm doing that now just because of where I'm at. Like, I'm not really in the space currently to start dating again because of things that have transpired recently. And so I am taking that time to focus on me. But I've said this before and I will say this again. My preference is not to be single. I don't enjoy being single. I don't prefer to be single. That's not something that I want. It's kind of just where I'm at currently in life, and it's just something that I've come to accept, but that's not what I prefer. I prefer to be in a relationship. Now, I'm not desperate for one, cuz best believe there are people that I could hit up and that I could talk to, that I could even potentially jump into a relationship with, but I'm not interested in them like that. I don't see something like that with them. And so that's not to say that, I don't have any options at all, but just no one worth it. And I don't mean to offend anybody, but no one that's been worth it and that's been worth getting into a relationship with has come across for me yet. So I say all that to say I'm a relationship type of person. I'm not someone that likes to talk to multiple dudes at one time. I'm very much like talk to one person and that's it. I'm just not someone that wants to explore. Now, but most people are, right? Most people in their early 20s, they want to explore, they want to see what's out there, but that's just not me. And so, with that being said, when it comes to, like my goals and stuff like that, I'm already thinking long term. I'm already thinking ahead of me wanting marriage and me wanting marriage by a certain time. I don't want to wait until I'm in my 30s. Now, if it happens in my 30s, then I'm not going to reject it either, but preferably sooner than later. I want to be in a committed relationship and I want to get married. And I'm, again, not saying I want to get married tomorrow. I'm not saying I want to get married next year, but I want that I want that to be something that I'm actively working towards. And my preference would be that would happen now. Obviously that's just not how the cards have played out for me at this point, but that is something that I actively want. And so for me, I'm like, okay, I would like to get married by 30. So you're probably wondering, well, why 30? Like, why that cutoff point? For me, just based off of what I have heard and seen from other women who are in their 30s and 40s and some even older than that, a lot of them have a really hard time. It gets harder for them when it comes to dating and finding people the older that they get. I know there's this I don't want to say misconception, because for some people it's true that the older you get, the more you know yourself and the more that other people know themselves, and so that can make it a little bit easier. But ultimately, some of the stories that I've heard from older women, it just seems like if you don't find someone, again, by the time you're 30, it gets really, really challenging. And I just don't want to be sitting up here in my 30s waiting for a man. And I don't want to be, you know, stressing over it or looking down on myself because I haven't found someone yet. I feel like a lot of women, like, who really do want that but haven't found it yet, I feel like they oftentimes get bitter because it's like they want love so bad and they want marriage and they want a family, but because they haven't found it yet, it makes them resentful almost that they haven't. And I don't want that to be me. And so I would rather just come to terms with, like, you know what? Marriage may not happen for me. I may not find my person. So let me just be okay with that. And for me, part of why I say, like, oh, I'm running out of time based off of this timeline. Because again, sometimes, when I tell people, oh, I want to get married by 30, people will say, like, oh, well, you still can. You have time. But And speaking to, that previous TikTok, this is why I don't feel this way. If we are talking, again, I'm 23, and you hear 23 and you're thinking, oh, you have all the time in the world. Not really. Because with me being 23 and me setting that timeline of getting married by 30, there are some things that need to happen in between there, right? So obviously I need to meet somebody. Who knows how long that alone is going to take, but we'll get to that later. So let's say I meet somebody this year. Somehow magically I meet someone this year, right? I need to take time to get to know that person. And that is a process that I am making it a point to take my time with. I've made the mistake before of rushing into something with someone, and I'm not doing that ever again. And so I'm going to take my time to actually feel out this person, really get to know them, and get past that initial stage of like everything is wonderful and it's all rainbows and unicorns. I need to get past that point, see who they really truly are on like a day-to-day basis, and then based off of that decide if I want to be with them or not. Then if we start dating, I don't want to rush into an engagement, and so we need to be together for, in my mind, at least 3 years until an engagement comes along, right? And then let's say we get engaged, and then we got to plan the wedding. Wedding planning could take a year or two, and so already I'm like right at the cutoff. And like I said, that's if I met somebody this year. What if I don't? What if it takes me 3, 4, 5 years to find somebody? It like then already my cutoff point is gone. And that's not to say that if it does take me that long and I can't make that cutoff point by 30, that I'm just gonna throw the whole relationship away. No, if it happens at 32, 33, great. But what I'm saying is that as I approach that age, if it's not looking up for me when it comes to like the whole dating thing, to me it just would make more sense to kind of like just not have that as a goal and just say, you know what, if it's meant to happen, then it'll happen, and if someone will come, they will come. It's the whole like putting energy into it. It's having to go out of your way to constantly meet new people, go on these dating apps. There's a lot of extra effort that goes into dating when you're actively trying and you're being intentional about it. Because I'll even say for me, right, like even though I'm not trying to rush into anything right now, I have been trying to talk to a few people here and there. But it's been, I can't say it's been like the greatest experience with trying to find people to talk to. And so yeah, I don't know. It's just for me, it's like, yeah, do I have a lot of time? Hypothetically, sure. But I don't know. I just feel like when you get to your 30s and 40s, it's like, or I just speak for me. I feel like I'm going to reach a point where I'm just not going to care as much. I'm not going to desire it as much. And I'm kind of just going to focus on me. And that's kind of what I'm doing now. Because again, like before my previous relationship, I had no thoughts of what my life would look like with a partner. I even growing up being a little girl, people talk about how, oh, when you were a little girl and used to dream about what your wedding dress would look like. I never had those thoughts. I never had those thoughts of a wedding dress, a partner. Literally, whenever I would think about what my future would look like, I could only ever think about what it would look like on my own by myself. And I don't know if that's because growing up I had a single parent, and so I just didn't really see a whole lot of that to even envision that for myself. But I only ever saw myself by myself. It literally wasn't until I got into my last relationship and I saw a lot of potential there to where I actually started thinking about those things. I thought about the future. I thought about buying a house together, having a kid together, going to our kids' soccer games. It literally wasn't until I got into my last relationship that I started to think about those things. And so now that I'm back single, I'm now kind of reverting back to that mindset of like, okay, what does my life look like with just me in it? I can't even think of wanting a partner at this point, because I'm not gonna lie, it kind of hurts a little bit to wonder if that'll happen for me or not. And I don't even want to put that pressure on myself again. And so right now I'm in the mindset of like, let me just live my life and make moves as a single person. Let me try to make goals and do things for myself as a single individual and kind of just go from there. I can't even start to think about all that other stuff again. Maybe I will if, again, the right person comes along. But right now, I really am just thinking about me, myself. What does my life look like? I'm imagining like me in an apartment, me like traveling and building my social channels and stuff like that. I'm kind of just thinking of my future from that perspective, and all the other stuff like having a family and stuff like that. I've just chosen to kind of like not think about those things or not include those things in my life plans, because not everyone ends up with that. And if that's ends up being my story, if I end up not finding my person, if I end up not getting married, I have to be okay with that. I have to be okay with just me and myself. And that's kind of what I've been on recently, in terms of like being okay with myself and finding happiness within myself, to where I don't need anybody. Because in the past, I did used to feel that way, like, oh, I need someone to complete me. I need someone so I can feel fulfilled, and so I don't feel like a failure, and I don't feel like life is horrible because I don't have somebody. I feel like I've finally reached that point where I feel good and I feel confident within myself and just myself, and I feel confident in who I am just as me. And not who I am as a friend or who I am as a partner, but just me. Which I think is a huge accomplishment for me. But yeah, that's kind of just how I feel. Like I just don't want to get caught up in this I I still have it as a goal deep down. Like, I do still want to get married deep down, and I still want that to occur before I turn 30. But I'm also thinking, okay, if it doesn't happen, I have to be okay with that. And what does that look like? What does living the rest of my life without a partner, what does that look like? Am I okay with that? And that's also why too, I'm, not trying to put pressure on myself, but also part of me is like, okay, well, if I want the best chance, I guess, at finding someone and having that future family, it would need to happen sooner rather than later. Because if it happens, not even if it happens later, but I feel like the longer I can't even say the longer I wait, the longer time passes by without me having that, I feel like the harder it's gonna get and the more over it I'm gonna be. Anyway, it's hard out here. Like, it's really hard out here. Like, dating nowadays in 2023 it's hard. It's very, very difficult, especially for our generation that isn't really into commitment like that, isn't into marriage like that. Everyone just wants a hookup or a quick fling. No one is thinking about the long term. And yes, that's normal for being in your 20s. I totally get that. But again, it's been a conversation in recent years that it's become like the new norm to like not commit and to not put forth the effort to find your person and to settle down and all of that. And that's not to say that that is for everybody. I'm fully aware that marriage is not for everybody. Monogamy is not for everybody. I completely understand that. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the people who they do want it deep down, but I guess because of let's call it what it is. People have lowered their standards. A lot of people have lowered their standards. And so even though they may want that committed relationship and that monogamy and marriage and all of that, they may not push for that, or they might settle for less because it's just become the norm to do that. And I'm just not someone that's willing to do that. Like, I know what I want. I know the type of relationship that I want. And so that's why I'm not rushing, or I'm not desperate for a relationship right now. I'm still going to take my time to get to know people and to meet people and stuff like that. But ultimately, it's like I also have to accept reality and accept where we are, and seeing how difficult it is to date and to meet people nowadays. I also have to realize too, like, that might make it harder for me to find someone and to have that. And so what does life look like without that? Should I start to consider that, and should I start coming to terms with that now? That's kind of where I am with that. So yeah, those are kind of like my views, I guess, on marriage. I hope I made sense. I feel like I was low key rambling a little bit, but this TikTok really inspired me to get on here and to talk about it because again, this is a conversation that I've had like with other women my age about like marriage and like, oh, like, do you want to get married, and like, when do you want to get married? And I kind of just wanted to put it all in one video to explain what my current views are, what my preference would be, because again, it's like I understand that like there is no time limit on marriage. I'm fully aware of that, but it's just speaking to what I would like and what I would prefer. I don't know, I don't want to say I'm exhausted and that I've completely given up hope, but I feel like I'm getting to that point because it's just like, again, even that, right, like even the dating process, because again, I don't have any interest in talking to multiple dudes and juggling all of these people, but I feel like that's kind of like the expectation. And so even with that, it's like this idea that I have to sit up here and put in all this energy into a person just for it to not work out a couple months later, and then you have to do that multiple times to try to find someone. That alone sounds exhausting, and I don't want to do that. But everyone's saying like, oh well, you have to get your heart broken multiple times, and it's like, I'm cool on that. Like, I'm real cool on that because I'm just at a point where that's a whole nother topic about just how I'm handling that whole process of trying to date and stuff, because it's just like, it's exhausting. Like I said, my if I could snap my fingers and pick my reality, I would have a partner, I would have my person, and we would be working towards the long term. Um, like, and I tried so hard to have that be my reality, but at the end of the day, you can't force situations to happen, and you can't force anyone to be with you. And so it is what it is. And I'm trying to give love another chance. I'm trying to stay open to it, but I'm also low key over it already. And so yeah, I think that covers the topic. From my perspective and how, again, I feel about all of that. And like I said, that TikTok explained perfectly what I've been trying to communicate to people, because I don't always express things in the best way. When I'm trying to like explain why I feel a certain way about a certain topic. And so I feel like this kind of put things into perspective about why it is that I'm like, hey, yeah, I have time, but not really. Because like she said, even like with starting a family. Now, I've always said that I wouldn't want to have kids until I'm 30 anyway. But that's what I'm saying is like, I want to get married, have that time. Like she said, she wants to have time where it's just her and her husband and no kids. I would like that as well. And so again, if I want that and I don't want to be on a biological clock, it's gonna have to happen sooner rather than later. And I don't have a lot of confidence that that's gonna happen. I really feel like it's gonna take me a really long time until I get into another relationship, which sucks. But it is what it is. But also, yeah, things can happen. Life happens. Life has a way of surprising me every time I blink. So who knows? But yeah, that's all I have to say on the topic. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you guys listen to that whole thing, I know sometimes I have a tendency to ramble and go on tangents about things, but if you guys enjoyed this episode, if you guys listened to this whole episode, I really do appreciate it. If you guys are watching this episode on YouTube, make sure you guys give it a big thumbs up. If you guys are watching this episode on Spotify, make sure you guys go ahead and give this podcast a 5-star rating. And you can also catch this podcast on other platforms that you guys listen to your podcasts on. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next episode.